The caregiver sang softly to the old man, unaware his millionaire son was watching and changed her life. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The hum of the hospital hallway was steady, a rhythm of soft footsteps, distant intercoms, and the faint beeping of heart monitors behind closed doors. Under the pale glow of fluorescent lights, Maya Collins tightened her ponytail and adjusted the strap of her caregiver badge. She had worked in Westbridge Rehabilitation Center for 3 years, long enough to know that some rooms carried heavier air than others. But tonight felt different. Her supervisor, Dr. Reed, had called her in for a private conversation. "Maya," he said, his tone careful, "we have a new patient, Mr. Whitmore. He will need constant care. He cannot speak, cannot move much. His family requested full privacy." Maya nodded. "I understand." "You do not," the doctor replied softly. "He is the father of Ethan Whitmore." The name made her pause. Everyone in the city knew it. The Whitmore family owned hospitals, charities, and a medical foundation so large it practically paid for the building they stood in. Maya took a slow breath. "So, you want me to be his caregiver?" "Yes, but be warned. No one lasts long in that room. The sun is protective." Hours later, Maya pushed open the door to room 16. The world outside fell silent. Inside, the lights were dim, curtains drawn, machines humming in steady unison. On the bed lay an old man, his face pale, his hands thin, veins rising like rivers beneath translucent skin. He was breathing through a nasal cannula, eyes closed, but something about him felt present, as if his spirit hovered just behind his eyelids. Maya moved quietly, arranging the blanket, checking the chart, adjusting the monitor. Her fingers brushed his hand, cold, but alive. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she whispered. "My name is Maya. I will be taking care of you from now on." No response, just the metronome of the heart monitor. She sighed and began her routine. Temperature, pulse, 4, check, sponge bath, lotion for dry skin. It was all mechanical at first, the kind of work that demanded patience more than skill. But as the minutes stretched, a strange calm filled her chest. The stillness of the room was not lifeless, it was sacred. When she finished, she hesitated at the foot of the bed, staring at the old man's face. "You remind me of my mother," she murmured. "She used to say, when you care for someone who cannot thank you, that is when love becomes real." Her voice cracked slightly, and she smiled through it. Without planning to, she began to hum a slow, gentle tune her mother used to sing on stormy nights. The sound was soft, trembling at first, then steady. Her words floated between the walls, low and tender, wrapping around the old man like a blanket. The monitor's rhythm stayed steady, but for a brief second, Maya thought she saw his fingers twitch. She froze, unsure if it was her imagination or a miracle. In that same moment, someone stood beyond the glass wall of the hallway, unseen by her. Ethan Whitmore watched in silence, his reflection faint against the glass, his eyes fixed on the caregiver who sang softly to the father he thought was already gone. The following night arrived with the same low hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint scent of antiseptic drifting through the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center. Maya Collins clocked in at exactly 7 in the evening, her uniform pressed and hair neatly tied, though her eyes carried the weight of sleeplessness. She had spent all day replaying the small movement she swore she saw from Mr. Whitmore's hand. Logic told her it was nothing, maybe a muscle spasm, but her heart whispered something else. "You are early again," said Lydia, another caregiver who was finishing her shift. Lydia glanced up from the computer desk, lowering her voice. "You know, the last nurse who took care of him did not last more than 2 weeks. His son watches every single thing. Cameras, reports, even the temperature in the room." Maya frowned. "Why?" Lydia shrugged. "Because the old man's care costs more per week than most people make in a year. The son thinks money can keep his father alive." Her tone softened. "Just be careful, Maya. He does not trust easily." Maya thanked her, but as she walked toward room 16, the words lingered like static in her mind. When she entered, The quiet hit her like before, dense and heavy, the kind of silence that carried its own heartbeat. The machines blinked steadily, the air conditioner hummed, and there he was, Mr. Whitmore, unchanged. She greeted him softly, her voice echoing faintly. "Good evening again, Mr. Whitmore. It is me, Maya. You are doing great, you know." She adjusted his blanket, making sure the edges were folded neatly. It was the small things that mattered, the small acts that gave dignity to a person who could not move or speak. She began to talk as she worked, her words meandering like conversation. "The cafeteria coffee is still terrible. I think the machine is plotting against us." She smiled faintly. "And the new intern spilled an entire tray of pudding on Dr. Reed today. You would have laughed, I am sure." No response, of course. But talking made her feel like the walls were listening. And maybe, somehow, he could too. After she finished cleaning and adjusting, she glanced at the piano corner of the therapy lounge visible through the half-open door. A thought crossed her mind. She went there during breaks sometimes, to play the same lullaby she sang last night. Something about that melody brought her peace. Without realizing it, she began to hum again. The same tune filled the air, soft and steady. As her voice rose slightly, she looked down and noticed a tremor ripple through the old man's fingers. "There it is again," she whispered. Her pulse quickened. She checked the monitor. The rhythm had shifted slightly, still normal, but livelier. She leaned closer. "Mr. Whitmore, can you hear me?" The answer was silence, but her instinct told her not to stop. She kept humming, her voice trembling just a bit, the sound floating like a prayer. Outside the room, Ethan Whitmore stood behind the glass panel once again, silent and unmoving. His tailored suit contrasted sharply against the sterile hallway. He had come unannounced, his presence catching even the night security off guard. He was not supposed to visit this late. But curiosity had dragged him here. He watched the young caregiver move with quiet purpose, speaking softly to his father as if her words mattered in a world where no one else believed they did. His jaw tightened. He did not understand why her voice stirred something in him. When she leaned close and whispered to his father, Ethan felt the ache of guilt twist in his chest. It had been months since he last spoke to the old man properly. He had convinced himself that business, meetings, and deals were reasons enough. But seeing this woman's tenderness broke through that illusion. Maya, unaware of the watcher, sat beside the bed and read aloud from a small book she carried, a collection of short poems her mother used to love. Her voice wrapped around the words with warmth. "When you have no strength left, remember, you once made it through yesterday." She looked at the man lying still. "And that means you can make it through tomorrow too." The monitor beeped softly, like a heartbeat agreeing. She smiled, setting the book down. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore." She turned off the bedside lamp and stepped out quietly. But in the hallway, Ethan was waiting. She startled slightly when she saw him. His presence filled the space effortlessly, tall, poised, but his expression unreadable. "You are Maya Collins?" he asked. She nodded, uncertain. "Yes, sir. I am Mr. Whitmore's caregiver." "I know who you are," he said. "I have been reviewing the reports." His tone was calm but edged. "You sang to him last night." Her cheeks warmed. "I did. It helps calm him. I am sorry if that was inappropriate." Ethan hesitated, then said, "It was not inappropriate. It was unexpected." His eyes flicked toward the room. "My father's monitors reacted last night. His pulse elevated. You should keep doing what you are doing." He turned to leave, then stopped. "But do not mistake my approval for trust. My father has had many people in that room. Most of them wanted something." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I only want him to feel less alone." For the first time, Ethan's expression softened. "That would be a first," he murmured. Then walked away, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Maya stood frozen, heart pounding. She knew now that the man who watched from the shadows was not a ghost, but the son who carried more loneliness than he let the world see. And for reasons she could not name, she wanted to help him heal too. The following morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of room 16, cutting pale lines across the old man's blanket. Maya Collins arrived early again, coffee in hand, the steam curling like breath in the cool air. The night before had replayed in her mind over and over, the moment Mr. Whitmore's son, Ethan, had spoken to her in the hallway. His voice had been polite but guarded, his words a mix of approval and warning. She had seen many families in her years as a caregiver, but something about the Whitmores felt different. There was a silence between father and son that was louder than any argument could be. She greeted the old man softly. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. It is a beautiful day. I hope you can feel the sun today." She adjusted the blinds slightly so the light touched his face. He looked peaceful, but she noticed something new. His fingers had moved slightly since the night before, resting now closer to the edge of the blanket. She smiled faintly. "Progress," she whispered. She began her morning routine, checking his vitals, changing linens, and preparing his breakfast supplement. The smell of oatmeal filled the room, mingling with the sterile scent of disinfectant. She worked methodically, but gently, humming the same melody that had seemed to stir him before. As she did, her mind drifted back to the promise she had made years ago. The reason she had chosen this path. The memory came like a film reel unspooling in her head. She was 16 when her mother fell ill. It had been sudden, a diagnosis that came with a timeline no one wanted to say aloud. The nights in the hospital had been long, filled with machines and silence and fear. Maya remembered sitting by her mother's bed, holding her hand, humming softly to keep the loneliness away. Her mother had smiled weakly and whispered, "Do not let anyone die alone, Maya. That is your gift." When her mother passed, Maya had promised herself she would turn that pain into something meaningful. Every patient since then had been her way of keeping that promise. The hum of the monitor brought her back to the present. She wiped a small tear from her cheek before it could fall. "You would have liked her, Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. She believed people can still hear love, even when the world thinks they cannot. She leaned down, whispering, "So if you can hear me, just know that you are not alone, okay?" She began to sing again, the same lullaby, quiet and tender. For a long while, the only sound in the room was her voice, a gentle thread weaving through the steady beeping of the machines. Then the monitor changed slightly faster, a flicker of energy. Maya's heart leapt. She pressed the call button for Dr. Reed, her voice steady but urgent. "Doctor," I think he responded. His heart rate increased when I started singing. Within moments, Dr. Reed appeared, flipping through the chart and checking the readings. "It is a minor fluctuation," he said, though his eyes softened. "Still, it is promising. Keep doing whatever you are doing, Miss Collins." As he left, Ethan appeared in the doorway, still dressed in a dark suit, tie loosened. "I heard there was a change," he said. Maya nodded. He reacted to the song again. Ethan stepped closer to the bed, his expression unreadable. "You really believe he can hear you?" "I believe people hear love," she answered. "Maybe not with their ears, but with something deeper." He studied her for a long moment, then looked down at his father. "He has been asleep for a year, a whole year since the accident. I have paid every expert in the country. And yet, he only responds to a song." His voice cracked slightly at the end. Maya's tone softened. "Maybe money cannot reach the places love can." Ethan's gaze flicked to hers, surprised by the honesty. "You speak as if you have seen this before." "I have," she said quietly. "My mother, she was in a coma for 3 weeks. She smiled before she left us. The doctors said it was just reflex, but I like to think she heard my voice." Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of exhaustion showing for the first time. "I do not know the last time I even spoke to him. I just kept waiting for someone else to fix it." He rubbed his temple, almost ashamed. "You are here now," Maya said. "That matters more than you think." He looked at her again, something unspoken passing between them, a fragile bridge built from empathy. Then the intercom broke the moment, calling for Ethan to report to the administrator's office. "Duty calls," he said, straightening his tie. "Keep singing, Miss Collins." When he left, the room felt smaller, quieter, but warmer somehow. Maya looked at the old man again and smiled. "You have a good son," she whispered. "He just forgot how to show it." She cleaned the instruments and organized the medications. Before leaving for her short break, She placed a small paper crane on the bedside table, a habit she had picked up after her mother's passing. "One for every good day," she said softly. In the hallway, Ethan paused outside the door again, watching through the narrow window as she worked. For the first time in a long while, he felt something loosen in his chest, hope, faint but real. And behind him, unseen, the old man's fingers twitched once more, as if answering the song echoing faintly down the sterile hall. The next evening, the wind outside the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center carried the chill of early autumn. Leaves scraped softly along the pavement as Maya Collins walked toward the side entrance, her steps light but her heart heavy with anticipation. She had been thinking about Mr. Whitmore all day, about the small progress she had witnessed, the way his pulse seemed to follow the rhythm of her song. Inside the building, the scent of disinfectant mingled with coffee and paper, the quiet hum of night shift nurses filling the hallways. As she clocked in, Lydia, her colleague, gave her a curious look. "You are back early again," Lydia said with a half-smile. "Word is the patient in 16 responds to your voice. You are making quite the impression." Maya blushed slightly. "It is just coincidence, I think. Maybe he likes the sound because it reminds him of something." Lydia leaned closer. "Just be careful. People talk when something looks too good to be true." Maya thanked her and walked toward room 16, the echo of her shoes faint on the polished floor. When she entered, the familiar hum greeted her, steady and calm. The old man lay as before, his face pale but peaceful. The lines around his eyes softened. She moved gently, adjusting his blanket, checking the monitors, whispering greetings as she worked. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. You did very well yesterday. Dr. Reed said your vitals are stronger today." She began her usual routine, talking softly as she prepared his nightly care. "The weather outside is colder now. The trees by the entrance have started to turn gold. You would like it, I think." She hummed the tune again, her voice filling the quiet. The melody was slow, soothing, wrapping around the rhythm of the machines, like a heartbeat. After a few minutes, she noticed it the faintest movement of his head, just a fraction, as though he were listening. Her breath caught. "Can you hear me?" she asked quietly. There was no answer, but the beeping of the monitor rose just slightly, like a whispered yes. She smiled through the sudden sting of tears. "You are doing great. Keep fighting." At that moment, the door opened softly, and Ethan Whitmore stepped inside. He had taken off his tie, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, the sharp businessman edge replaced by something almost human. "I did not mean to interrupt," he said quietly. "I just wanted to see how he was doing tonight." Maya straightened. "He is stable. His vitals are improving slowly. I think he can hear things around him now." Ethan stepped closer to the bed, his eyes on his father. "You really believe that?" "Yes," she said simply. "He reacts when I speak. Maybe his body remembers kindness." Ethan stood there in silence for a long moment. Then he reached for his father's hand and hesitated before touching it. "Hey, Dad," he said softly, his voice uncertain, as if using words he had forgotten. "It is me, Ethan." The name hung in the air. The machine beeped faster for a second. Ethan's hand trembled. "Do you think he knew it was me?" "Yes," Maya said. "He knows your voice." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. For a few moments, neither spoke. The quiet between them was filled only by the rhythm of the monitor and the soft hum of the fluorescent light. Then Ethan turned toward her. "You talk to him like he is awake." "Because I think a part of him is," she said. "We talk about small things, the world outside, music. It gives him something to hold on to." Ethan watched her, studying the calm patience in her eyes. "You really care, do you not?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I do. I care because people forget that healing does not always mean recovery. Sometimes it means reminding someone they still matter." Ethan looked at her with a mix of surprise and respect. "Most people would not say that. Most people only care about results." "Maybe," she said softly, "but I care about moments." Her words lingered in the air. Ethan exhaled and leaned back slightly. "You sound like my mother," he admitted. "She used to say something like that. That love was a moment that never left, even when everything else did." His voice caught near the end. Maya looked at him gently. "She sounds like a good person." "She was," he said. "She died 10 years ago. My father never really came back after that." He turned his gaze toward the old man again, eyes glassy with memory. He built hospitals, charities, and yet he could not save her. I guess I followed him, thinking if I built enough, I would not have to feel anything either. Maya stood quietly beside him, letting the silence speak. Finally, she said, "You can still start over. You are here now. That is what matters." Ethan nodded slowly, the words sinking deep. The moment stretched between them, fragile and real. Then a soft chime from the monitor pulled their attention back. Mr. Whitmore's fingers twitched again, this time longer, unmistakable. Ethan gasped. "Did you see that?" Maya's heart leapt. "Yes, he is responding." She leaned closer, speaking gently to the patient. "You are doing so well. Keep going." Ethan stared, his face a mix of disbelief and hope. For the first time in months, he smiled. "Maybe he really can hear you. Maybe he hears both of us," she said. The words hung like light in the dim room. As the hour grew late, Ethan stayed, sitting silently beside the bed while Maya finished her rounds. When she finally said goodnight, he thanked her quietly, the gratitude genuine. "Thank you for not giving up on him." She smiled, her voice soft but firm. "That is what we do here, Mr. Whitmore. We do not give up." When she left, Ethan remained by his father's side, the melody of her lullaby still echoing faintly in the room, mingling with the steady rhythm of life that refused to fade. The next morning, the sky over Westbridge was a soft shade of gray, the kind of color that promised rain but never quite delivered it. Inside the rehabilitation center, the air was calm, filled with the faint hum of machines and the steady rhythm of footsteps from nurses moving through the hall. Maya Collins arrived early again, carrying her usual cup of coffee and the same quiet determination that had guided her through every shift. She greeted the receptionist with a smile and walked straight to room 16. Something in her chest felt lighter today, as if hope itself had taken up residence there. When she opened the door, the old man lay as before, still and quiet but somehow different. The faint flush of color on his cheeks told her his circulation was improving. She set her bag down and whispered, "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. It is another beautiful day. I'm glad you stayed with us through the night." As she checked his vitals, she noticed that his hand was resting slightly open, no longer stiff and curled as it had been weeks ago. She smiled, gently wrapping her fingers around his. "We are getting somewhere, you and I," she said softly. Then she noticed the faintest sound outside the door, like a cough quickly stifled. She turned her head and saw Ethan Whitmore standing in the doorway, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He looked almost embarrassed to be caught. "I brought you one," he said. "Dr. Reed mentioned you do not take breaks often." Maya blinked in surprise before smiling. "Thank you. That is very kind." He stepped closer, offering the cup. "I thought maybe you could use it. You have done more for my father than most of the doctors here." Maya took the cup carefully. "I have not done anything special. I just try to make him feel less alone." Ethan looked at his father, his expression softening. That might be exactly what he needed. For a moment they stood in silence, sipping their coffee, the room filled with the quiet music of the machines. Then Maya said, "He moved again last night. His head turned slightly when I sang. It was small, but it was real." Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as emotion welled up. "You know, I have not seen him respond to anyone since the accident. My mother's photo used to sit on that nightstand. After she passed, he stopped looking at it. It felt like he just disappeared." Maya followed his gaze to the empty space beside the bed. Without thinking, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small picture frame she kept for her patients, a simple wooden one she used for family photos when they had none nearby. "Maybe we can fix that," she said. "Do you have a photo of her?" Ethan's eyes widened, then softened. "Yes, at home. I will bring it tomorrow." "Good," Maya said. Sometimes a familiar face can guide someone back. She began to hum again, the same tune she had sung every night since arriving. Her voice floated through the room, warm and steady, carrying comfort in every note. Ethan watched silently, his hand resting on the back of his father's chair. The tension in his shoulders eased as the melody filled the air. For a brief moment, it felt like time itself slowed down. When she finished, Ethan spoke quietly. "You have a beautiful voice. It is peaceful." "Thank you," she said, setting the cup down. "It was my mother's lullaby. She said it could calm storms. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe it can. It seems to calm more than just him. He looked at her with a kind of admiration that caught her off guard. A mixture of gratitude and curiosity. But before either could speak again, Dr. Reed entered the room, holding a tablet with a concerned look. Maya, Mr. Whitmore's progress has been noted, but there are questions from administration, he said. They are wondering about the methods you are using. Some of the staff think the improvements are unconventional. Maya frowned. I have not done anything harmful, doctor. I just talk to him and sing. It keeps him grounded. Dr. Reed sighed. I know that, but hospitals run on policies. There are people who prefer data over miracles. Ethan straightened. Dr. Reed, if the hospital has concerns, they can address them to me. I fund the Whitmore wing of this facility. I want her to continue exactly as she has. The doctor blinked, then nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. I will make sure the reports reflect your wishes. After he left, Maya turned to Ethan. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did, he replied simply. This is the first time in months that I have seen something close to hope. I will not let bureaucracy get in the way. She looked at him for a moment, reading the sincerity in his face. You really do care, she said. You hide it, but it is there. He gave a small laugh. I guess you are better at seeing people than I am. It is part of the job, she said softly. He smiled at that, a quiet moment passing between them before the sound of rain began tapping against the window. Maya pulled the blinds slightly so the soft light reflected across the room. The old man's eyelids fluttered for a moment, and both of them froze. Did you see that? She whispered. Ethan leaned forward. Dad, he said carefully. The eyelids twitched again, and his fingers curled ever so slightly. Maya's voice was steady, but trembling. He is responding. It is happening. Ethan's breath caught as tears filled his eyes. He reached for his father's hand, gripping it gently. We are here, Dad. We are right here. For the first time since the accident, there was color in Ethan's voice, hope, raw and real. Maya stood beside him, watching the faintest movement ripple through the old man's face, as if he were trying to smile. The monitor beeped stronger, steadier. In that small, quiet room, surrounded by rain and light, something had changed. Life was stirring again, answering the song that had never stopped calling. That night, the rain continued to fall outside the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center, painting streaks of silver against the tall glass windows. The rhythmic tapping of raindrops echoed faintly through the corridors, mingling with the distant sound of machines humming in steady unison. Maya Collins walked quietly toward room 16, her shoes brushing softly against the polished floor. Her heart still raced with the memory of what she had seen earlier that day, the faint twitch of Mr. Whitmore's eyelids, the flicker of awareness that had spread through the room like a heartbeat returning to life. She could still see the look on Ethan Whitmore's face when his father's hand moved, the raw disbelief and hope colliding all at once. Now, as she pushed the door open, she found Ethan already there, seated beside the bed, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes fixed on his father's face. The lamp on the side table cast a soft circle of light around them, warm against the cool gray of the rain-soaked world outside. You came back, Maya said quietly. Ethan looked up and managed a small smile. I could not sleep. I wanted to make sure it was real. Maya walked closer, setting her bag down. It is real. Small progress, but progress all the same. She began her usual routine, checking vitals, adjusting the monitor lines, and making sure the patient was comfortable. Ethan watched her hands move steady, careful, patient. You make this look effortless, he said. It is not, she replied, glancing at him. Every small step takes time, but I believe effort creates miracles, not luck. Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze softening. When my mother was sick, I used to visit the hospital every night. She said the same thing, effort creates miracles. I guess I forgot that for a long time. Maya looked at him curiously. What was she like? His expression grew distant. She was kind. She made everyone around her feel seen. Even when she was dying, she kept thanking the nurses, asking about their families. My father could not handle it. He started spending more time at work. I was angry for years, thinking he abandoned her. But I think he just did not know how to watch someone he loved fade away. Maya listened quietly, her heart tightening. Pain changes people, she said softly. Sometimes silence is the only way they know to survive. Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. I wish I had understood that sooner. He looked down at his father. Now I would give anything just to talk to him one more time. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. You are talking to him now. He can hear you. He looked at her, searching her eyes. Do you really believe that? I do, she said firmly. The body sleeps, but love does not. Love listens. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Then Maya noticed the old man's fingers twitch again, just slightly, like before. Ethan? She whispered. He looked up instantly, eyes wide. Dad? He said, leaning closer. The monitor beeped a little faster, and the old man's breathing changed shallower but more deliberate. Maya smiled. He knows your voice. Keep talking. Ethan's throat tightened, but he began to speak, his words trembling. It is me, Dad. Ethan. I am here. You are safe. We are all right. His voice broke near the end. The old man's lips moved faintly, too soft to form words, but it was enough to make both of them freeze. Maya covered her mouth, fighting back tears. He is trying, she said. Ethan's eyes filled with emotion. He is still in there. He stayed that way for several minutes, holding his father's hand, whispering softly, telling him stories from years ago, his first baseball game, the time they rebuilt the old treehouse together, his mother's laugh. With every word, the air in the room seemed to shift, lighter, warmer. When the old man's breathing steadied again, Maya said, That is enough for tonight. You do not want to overwhelm him. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. I have not felt this alive in years, he admitted. You gave me that. Maya shook her head. No, your father did. You both did. I just helped you hear each other again. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, a real one this time, gentle and unguarded. Still, he said quietly, Thank you, Maya. Her cheeks warmed. You are welcome. As she turned to tidy the bedside table, Ethan noticed something he had never paid attention to before. On the corner of the desk sat a small sketchbook, open to a page filled with pencil drawings, flowers, hands, and faces that looked peaceful. You draw? He asked. Maya looked startled, then nodded. Only when the patients sleep. It helps me remember them when they recover, or when they do not. He picked up the sketchbook carefully, turning the page to a soft pencil drawing of an elderly couple sitting under a tree, the woman leaning on the man's shoulder. It is beautiful, he said quietly. That is my parents, she explained. I drew it from memory. They look happy. They were, she said softly. They taught me that love is not about how long you have, but how deeply you care. Ethan set the book down gently. I think you are right. Outside, the rain began to slow, replaced by the sound of distant thunder rolling across the hills. The room felt warmer, alive in a way it had not been before. As Maya gathered her things, Ethan looked at his father once more. Rest well, Dad. We are waiting for you. He stood beside Maya, watching the steady rhythm on the monitor. For the first time, the line that marked his father's heartbeat looked like hope made visible, rising and falling in quiet defiance of the night. The next morning dawned bright over Westbridge, sunlight filtering softly through the thin white curtains of room 16. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind the clean scent of earth and the glistening reflection of trees outside the hospital windows. Maya Collins entered quietly, holding a small bouquet of fresh daisies wrapped in brown paper. She placed them in a glass vase by the window, her movements gentle, deliberate. The soft hum of machines filled the air as usual. But today there was something different in the rhythm of the room. The old man's breathing was stronger, steadier, and his color looked warmer. Ethan Whitmore was already sitting in the chair beside the bed, his suit jacket draped carelessly over the armrest. He looked up as she entered, a tired but genuine smile touching his lips. You brought flowers, he said. My mother used to love daisies, she replied, adjusting the stems. She said they bring sunlight where there is none. Ethan watched her for a moment, thoughtful. You bring that sunlight yourself, you know. She glanced at him, surprised, and then smiled shyly. That is kind of you to say. I am just doing my job. He shook his head slightly. It is more than a job. I have seen dozens of caregivers over the years, but none like you. The way you talk to him, it is like you see something the rest of us cannot. Maya turned toward the bed, her voice soft. Maybe that is because I still believe in the parts of people that are unseen. The quiet parts that still listen when everyone thinks they cannot. Ethan's gaze softened. That is rare these days. She brushed a strand of hair from her face and began her morning routine, checking the monitors, taking notes, speaking softly to her patient as she worked. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. The rain has stopped. The city smells like new beginnings. I hope you can feel that too. As she reached for his hand, she felt warmth, real warmth, where before there had been only the cold stillness of fragile skin. Her heart skipped. His circulation is improving again, she said. Ethan leaned forward, disbelief flashing across his face. You are right. His hand feels warmer. The two exchanged a glance filled with cautious hope. Maya smiled. That is what happens when the body begins to remember life. Ethan let out a slow breath, sitting back, visibly moved. Every time I come here, I expect the worst. And then you show me something different. Maya's tone was calm, but her words held quiet strength. Hope is stubborn. It shows up even when we do not invite it. Ethan chuckled softly. You sound like my mother again. Maybe she is still speaking through the people who care for him, Maya said with a small smile. For a while, the room fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of the monitors and the rustle of papers as Maya recorded updates. Ethan studied her face, the calm focus in her eyes, the steady rhythm of her breathing. There was something grounding about her presence, something that made the chaos of the outside world feel small. Maya, he said after a moment, his voice quieter, almost hesitant. Why did you choose this work? Most people could not bear it being surrounded by illness, uncertainty, pain. She paused, then answered truthfully. Because I know what it feels like to be powerless. When my mother was dying, all I wanted was someone to treat her like a person, not just a patient. I promised myself I would be that person for someone else one day. Ethan listened, his throat tightening. You have more strength than most people I know. She smiled faintly. It is not strength. It is just love, in a different form. The words hung in the air, simple and true. Then a knock came at the door. Dr. Reed entered with a nurse, both checking charts. Good morning, he said briskly. We have reviewed the reports. Mr. Whitmore's vitals are showing consistent improvement. It is slow, but steady. Ethan stood, the relief in his eyes undeniable. So, he really is getting better. Dr. Reed nodded. It appears so. Whatever you are doing, Miss Collins, it is working. The nurse beside him smiled warmly. Maybe your song is magic. Maya blushed. It is not magic, just connection. Dr. Reed smiled slightly. Whatever it is, keep doing it. When they left, Ethan turned back to her. You know, if my father wakes up, it will be because of you. No, she said firmly. It will be because of love. I just carried it into the room. He stared at her, silent for a moment, and then said softly, You really do not see what you are doing, do you? She tilted her head, confused. What do you mean? You are healing more than him, he said. You are healing me too. His words caught her off guard. For a moment she could not speak. Then she looked down, her voice quiet but steady. Sometimes we end up healing ourselves by helping others. He smiled almost sadly. Maybe that is what I have been missing all this time. The sunlight had shifted by then, spilling gold across the bedspread. Maya reached for her notebook, writing down the day's notes. Ethan stood beside her, watching his father breathe, feeling the faint pulse beneath the old man's skin. Then, as if responding to their presence, Mr. Whitmore's eyelids fluttered again briefly but clearly. Ethan froze. Did you see that? Maya nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. Yes, he is fighting his way back. Ethan's voice broke into a whisper. Dad, we are here. It is okay. The old man's lips moved faintly, like a ghost of a smile. Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. He knows you are here, she said softly. Ethan exhaled shakily, his shoulders trembling as he tried to contain the flood of emotion. He reached for Maya's hand, gripping it tightly without realizing it. She did not pull away. They stood there like that for a long moment, two people bound by hope, their hands joined between life and memory. The monitor beeped steadily, the rhythm strong and sure. Outside, the world was still wet from rain. But inside room 16, the first real sunlight in months filled the air. The following evening arrived quietly, the golden light of sunset spilling through the windows of Westbridge Rehabilitation Center. The long shadows stretched across the tiled floor as the night shift began to replace the day staff. Maya Collins walked down the corridor with her notebook pressed against her chest, her steps slow and thoughtful. For the first time since she had started caring for Mr. Whitmore, she felt something close to real anticipation. His body was beginning to remember movement. His fingers had curled again, and now his eyelids fluttered almost every evening. Each small sign carried the weight of a miracle. When she entered room 16, she found Ethan Whitmore already there, his suit jacket draped neatly over the back of the chair, his sleeves rolled, his eyes fixed on his father's face. He had barely left the hospital since the last flicker of response. "Good evening," she greeted softly. Ethan turned, his face lighting up slightly. "You are right on time, as always." She smiled, setting her notebook down. "Routine keeps both the patient and the caregiver sane. And maybe the family, too," Ethan said with a faint laugh, though his tone carried something heavier underneath. She began her routine, checking the readings on the machines, writing notes, and adjusting the blanket. "His vitals are stable," she said. "His breathing pattern looks more natural every day." Ethan nodded, still watching his father. "It feels strange to say, but I think I am starting to believe in things I used to mock. Faith, miracles, whatever you want to call it." Maya looked at him curiously. "What changed your mind?" "You," he said simply. "And him." She smiled softly, focusing on her work. "Maybe you both changed each other." Ethan's eyes softened as he studied her. "You talk like you have been through something similar." She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "When my mother was in a coma, I used to talk to her the same way I talked to him. The doctors told me she could not hear a thing. But I did it anyway. When she passed, one of the nurses told me she had been squeezing my hand the night before. That was enough for me to believe she heard every word." Ethan's voice was gentle. "I am sorry you went through that. It shaped who I am," she said. "I learned that kindness is not wasted, even if no one sees it." For a while, silence filled the room except for the steady rhythm of the machines. Maya reached for the small portable speaker she sometimes used for therapy sessions. "Music helped my mother," she said. "Sometimes it wakes something inside." Ethan nodded, giving his consent. She played a soft, instrumental melody, slow and peaceful, the kind that could make the air itself seem to breathe. Then she began to hum, her voice quiet, tender, blending perfectly with the music. Ethan sat motionless, listening. There was something about her tone that felt like a prayer disguised as a song. Halfway through, the monitor beeped a little faster, and both of them froze. The old man's fingers twitched again, more distinct this time. Maya leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Mr. Whitmore, if you can hear us, you are safe," she said. Ethan reached for his father's hand, gripping it gently. "Dad, it is Ethan. We are right here. You can rest, but do not give up. You still have people waiting for you." The old man's lips moved faintly, and a weak sound escaped so faint it was almost a sigh. Maya's breath caught. "He tried to speak," she whispered. Ethan's eyes widened, and for a moment he looked like a child again, caught between disbelief and wonder. "Dad?" he said again, his voice trembling. The sound came once more, just a faint breath, but enough to make Maya's chest tighten with emotion. She turned to Ethan, her eyes shining. "He is responding to you." Ethan looked as if he might break, his voice shaking as he said, "I have waited so long to hear something from him." "He hears you now," she said softly. The monitor steadied, and the old man's breathing slowed again, peaceful, calm. Maya smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "He used all his strength just to remind us he is still fighting." Ethan sat down heavily, his shoulders trembling. "I did not think this would ever happen," he murmured. Maya sat beside him. Sometimes healing starts in silence before it reaches the body. Ethan turned toward her, gratitude written across his face. You always know what to say. I just speak what I believe, she said quietly. Words have weight. If you speak love often enough, it finds its way into the world. He watched her for a moment longer, then said softly, You are different from anyone I have ever met. She smiled, trying to lighten the mood. Different can be dangerous. Or maybe exactly what the world needs, he said. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the air between them held something unspoken, fragile, but undeniable. Then the door opened, breaking the stillness. Dr. Reed entered with a chart in hand. Good evening. How are we doing tonight? He asked, unaware of what had just happened. Ethan stood quickly. He tried to speak, he said. The doctor blinked, surprised. He what? Maya nodded eagerly. There was a sound. He moved his lips twice, like he was trying to form words. Dr. Reed checked the vitals, his expression turning thoughtful. This is extraordinary, he said quietly. We will need to run some cognitive tests tomorrow. But this is promising. When he left, Ethan looked back at Maya, his voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow, he said tomorrow. She smiled softly. Maybe tomorrow will be the day he opens his eyes. As the night deepened, they sat in quiet companionship, the music still playing softly in the background, and for the first time, hope did not feel fragile, it felt certain, alive, and breathing in the same rhythm as the man they both refused to give up on. The next morning came with a quiet golden light that spilled through the tall hospital windows and painted soft reflections across the polished floors. The air felt lighter inside the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center, as if the building itself had exhaled after months of holding its breath. Maya Collins walked briskly down the hall toward room 16, her heart beating faster than usual. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the sound of Mr. Whitmore's faint attempt to speak. Each whisper, each flicker of movement, had stayed with her through the night like a promise. When she opened the door, she found Ethan Whitmore standing by the window, still in the same clothes from the night before, his eyes tired but shining. He turned at the sound of her footsteps and smiled faintly. Good morning, he said. I do not think I slept at all. Neither did I, she admitted softly. I kept thinking about what happened. He tried to talk, Ethan. That means something. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. It means everything. Maya placed her bag on the counter and began her morning routine checking monitors, adjusting the oxygen line, making small notes on her clipboard. The air in the room hummed with quiet energy, the kind that came only when hope was near. The tests are scheduled for this afternoon, she said. Dr. Reed wants to check his cognitive response and reflexes. Ethan nodded again, his eyes fixed on his father. I will be here. I am not leaving his side again. She smiled softly. I believe he knows that. As she worked, she continued talking to Mr. Whitmore, her tone gentle but lively. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. You gave us quite the surprise last night. You have everyone talking about you in the nurses' lounge. Ethan chuckled softly. You really think he can hear all this? I do, she said without hesitation. The mind may sleep, but the heart listens. Ethan fell silent, watching her closely as she spoke to his father like he was simply a man resting after a long day. There was no pity in her voice, no clinical detachment, only warmth, steady and real. After a while, Maya said quietly, Would you like to help me with his therapy today? Ethan looked surprised. Me? Yes. It is simple. We will talk to him. Tell him things that matter. The sound of a familiar voice can do wonders. Ethan hesitated, then pulled the chair closer to the bed. All right, he said, his voice low. I can do that. Maya smiled. Start with something small. A memory. Something happy. Ethan looked at his father, unsure where to begin. Do you remember when you taught me to fish at Green Valley Lake? He began slowly. You said patience was the key, but I spent the whole day tangling the line. You never got mad, not once. Maya glanced up from her notes, smiling. Good. Keep going. And when I finally caught something, it was not even a fish, it was an old boot. You laughed so hard you fell off the dock. Mom was furious, but she took a picture anyway. He paused, his voice softening. I still have that picture." As he spoke, the monitor's rhythm changed slightly faster, but steady. Maya's eyes widened. "He is responding, Ethan. Keep talking." Ethan's throat tightened, but he continued, his words trembling. "You were my hero, you know. Even when I got older and pretended I did not care, I was just trying to be like you." Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she watched him. The walls of the sterile hospital room had never felt more alive. The old man's fingers twitched faintly, curling just enough for Ethan to notice. "Dad," he whispered. "If you can hear me, squeeze my hand." For a long second there was nothing. And then the faintest pressure answered. Ethan gasped, his breath catching. "He did it," he said, his voice breaking. "He actually did it." Maya pressed a hand to her mouth, her own eyes wet. "He is coming back, Ethan. He is really fighting his way back." Ethan's shoulders shook as he laughed through his tears, a sound full of relief and disbelief. "Thank you," he said, looking at her. "I do not even know how to begin thanking you for this." "Do not thank me," she said softly. "Thank him. He never gave up." They both stayed like that for a while, holding on to the fragile miracle that had just unfolded. After a few minutes, Maya stood and gently said, "He needs rest now. Small steps, remember?" Ethan nodded, wiping his eyes. "Right, small steps." As she adjusted the blanket, he looked at her again, his voice quiet but sincere. "You know, I used to think healing came from medicine, from control, from science. But now I think it comes from something much simpler." "What is that?" she asked. "Love," he said. "Real love. The kind that shows up every single day, even when no one notices." She met his gaze and smiled softly. "Then maybe he is the luckiest man alive." Ethan looked down at his father, emotion filling his voice. "No," he said. "Maybe I am." Outside, the sky had turned from gold to pale blue, sunlight streaming through the window and landing across the bed. The steady beeping of the monitor filled the silence between them, rhythmic and sure, the sound of a heartbeat that refused to stop believing. By the end of that week, the story of Mr. Whitmore's unexpected progress had quietly spread through the halls of the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center. Nurses spoke about it in hushed tones near the break room, and even the doctors who prided themselves on logic and data began to linger near room 16 during their rounds. Some whispered that it was luck, others said it was a fluke, but Maya Collins knew it was something deeper. Each morning, she arrived earlier than her shift required, carrying the same small notebook and the same soft determination that had guided her since the beginning. The old man's eyes still remained closed, but there was life beneath those lids, a kind of silent awareness that she could feel each time she touched his hand. That morning, as she entered the room, she found Ethan Whitmore standing near the window again, his suit replaced by a simple sweater and rolled sleeves. He looked more like a son now than a CEO. "You beat me here," he said with a tired smile. "I could say the same about you," she replied. "You have been here every morning for days. When do you rest?" "Rest feels impossible lately," he said quietly. "Hope keeps me awake." She smiled softly, setting her things down. "Hope has that effect." She began her routine with practiced care, checking vitals, replacing linens, adjusting the IV line. The faint sunlight filtering through the blinds landed on the old man's face, giving his skin a warm glow. Ethan stepped closer. "He looks more like himself today," he said. "His face looks peaceful. That is a good sign," she said. "Sometimes healing begins where peace settles first." Ethan nodded, watching as she smoothed the blanket. "You really believe all this, do you not? That love can bring someone back?" "I do," she said simply. "Love speaks a language that the body remembers, even when the mind forgets." Before Ethan could answer, the door opened, and Lydia, one of the senior nurses, stepped inside with a clipboard. Her tone was friendly but carried an undercurrent of curiosity. "Good morning, Maya, Mr. Whitmore." She glanced at the patient before adding, "Word is traveling fast. Everyone is talking about the singing nurse who brought the Whitmore patriarch back from silence." Maya flushed slightly, setting down her pen. "That is exaggerated. He is recovering because of the medical care, not me." Lydia smirked. "Maybe, or maybe you are just too humble to admit it." She looked toward Ethan. "Your family's generosity has helped this hospital for years. It is nice to see some good news for a change. Ethan offered a polite nod. We are just grateful he is improving. After Lydia left, Maya exhaled quietly. People love to make stories out of things they do not understand. Ethan looked at her with a small smile. Maybe they just want something to believe in. She did not respond right away. Instead, she picked up her notebook and began jotting down new notes. The sound of her pen filled the quiet room. You know, Ethan said after a moment, I used to think belief was weakness. Something people clung to because they were afraid of reality. But you have made me see it differently. Belief is not weakness, she said, glancing up. It is courage disguised as faith. The words hung in the air, soft but steady. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the monitor beeped louder than usual, and both of them turned toward the bed. The old man's fingers moved again, but this time the motion was stronger, deliberate. Maya's heart leapt. Ethan, look, she whispered. The old man's hand shifted slightly toward his son's voice. Ethan reached for it, his own voice trembling. Dad, it is me, Ethan. I am right here. The old man's mouth moved faintly, and though no sound came out, his lips shaped something that made Ethan freeze. Maya leaned closer, reading the motion. He is trying to say your name, she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. He knows I am here. Maya smiled through tears. He has always known. The moment hung between them, fragile and perfect, until the beeping steadied again. Ethan exhaled slowly, emotion catching in his voice. Every time I think I have seen the limit of what is possible, he proves me wrong. That is the beauty of the human spirit, she said softly. It refuses to stop trying. He turned toward her, his voice quieter now. You have changed everything, Maya. Not just for him, for me, too. She blinked, unsure what to say. I did not mean to. Maybe the best things happen when we do not mean to, he replied. She smiled faintly, but quickly returned her focus to the patient. Let us stay focused on him. He is the one who deserves this moment. Ethan nodded, understanding but still watching her as if seeing her for the first time. Later that afternoon, when Dr. Reed arrived to conduct the reflex test, the old man's responses stunned everyone in the room. His fingers twitched on command. His breathing adjusted when spoken to. Even the doctor, usually stoic, had to stop and take a deep breath. This is remarkable, he said quietly. I have no explanation for it other than human will. Ethan looked at Maya, and she smiled. Sometimes that is explanation enough. After the doctor left, Ethan turned to her again, his voice filled with gratitude. Whatever happens next, you have given me back my father. He is still the one doing the hard work, she said. We are just the witnesses. As she spoke, sunlight slipped lower through the window, landing on the paper crane she had placed on the bedside table weeks ago. Ethan noticed it, smiling faintly. You made that, did you not? Yes, she said. One for every good day. He nodded, looking at it for a long moment. Then I guess we need a bigger shelf. She laughed softly, the sound light and warm, and in that small sunlit room where faith and science had quietly intertwined, it felt as if hope itself had finally decided to stay. The next day dawned clear, the sky a pale shade of blue that promised warmth after days of rain. Sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of room 16, landing on the paper crane that now stood proudly beside the bed. Maya Collins arrived earlier than usual, carrying a thermos of coffee and a quiet smile. The nurses greeted her warmly as she passed through the corridor, their eyes filled with curiosity and admiration. The story of Mr. Whitmore's gradual awakening had spread beyond the hospital walls, turning whispers of hope into cautious belief. When Maya entered the room, she found Ethan already there, his hair slightly tousled, his expression lighter than it had been in months. He looked up when she walked in. Morning, he said with a smile. You are early again. Old habits, she said, returning his smile. How was he this morning? Ethan's gaze softened as he looked at his father. Peaceful. I sat with him most of the night. He moved his lips a few times while I was talking. I think he was trying to say something. Maya's eyes brightened. That is wonderful. His awareness is growing. She set down her bag and began her routine, her hands moving with calm precision. The steady beeping of the monitor matched the quiet rhythm of their conversation. "Do you ever think about what he might say when he wakes?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Every day. I keep wondering if he will even remember me, or if he will remember Mom." "Memory is strange," she said, "but love has its own way of surviving. Sometimes it lingers even when names fade." Ethan's expression softened. "That sounds like something my mother would have said." "Maybe she is still saying it," Maya replied gently. As she spoke, the old man's eyelids fluttered again, a faint tremor passing across his face. Ethan leaned forward immediately. "Dad?" he whispered. Maya watched closely, her breath catching. The old man's mouth opened slightly, a faint sound escaping a whisper too weak to form a word, but enough to fill the room with electricity. "He is trying again," she said softly. "He is fighting to find his voice." Ethan gripped his father's hand, his eyes wide. "We hear you, Dad. Take your time." The old man's lips moved once more, but the sound was lost in the hum of the machines. Maya placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Even trying is progress," she said. "Healing is not a straight line. It takes courage to return piece by piece." Ethan nodded, his voice rough. "He was always the strongest man I knew. I should have known he would not give up." She smiled faintly. "Strength runs in the family, it seems." For a few moments they stayed in silence, watching the steady rhythm of the monitor. Then Maya said quietly, "Do you ever talk to him about the things you wish you had said before the accident?" Ethan hesitated. "Not really. It is hard to know where to begin." "Then begin anywhere," she said gently. "The words you never say can grow heavy if you keep them too long." Ethan looked down at his father, his voice low. "I used to blame you, Dad, for everything, for being gone too much, for not knowing how to say you missed Mom. I thought that if I worked hard enough, I would finally understand you. But all I did was turn into a man who did not know how to feel." Maya's heart tightened as she listened. Ethan's voice shook slightly. "I am sorry, Dad, for being angry, for waiting too long to forgive you." The monitor beeped steadily, as if responding to his words. Maya whispered, "He hears you." Ethan looked up at her, tears in his eyes. "I hope so." "He does," she said softly. "Love does not need sound to travel." She stepped back, giving him space. He stayed there, holding his father's hand, whispering quietly, words meant only for them. When he finally turned back to Maya, his face looked different, lighter, unburdened. "You were right," he said. "It feels better to say it, even if he cannot answer." "He will," she said. "One day soon." Ethan smiled faintly. "I believe that now." She returned his smile, her voice warm. "That is what makes the difference. Belief." Later that morning, Dr. Reed entered the room, clipboard in hand, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Good morning. I just reviewed last night's readings. His brain activity is increasing. We may be approaching the next stage of recovery." Ethan stood, disbelief flickering across his face. "You mean he could wake up soon?" "Possibly," the doctor said. "There are no guarantees, but the signs are promising." When the doctor left, the room was quiet again except for the soft hum of machines. Ethan turned to Maya, his voice filled with emotion. "Every day I used to dread coming here. Now I wake up looking forward to it." "That is what hope does," she said. "It changes the way you see the day." He watched her closely. "You always find the right words. How do you do that?" She smiled. "Maybe because I have had to tell them to myself more times than I can count." He chuckled softly. "Then I am grateful you did." The afternoon sunlight grew stronger as they sat together, the warmth spilling across the bed. Maya took out her sketchbook again and drew quietly as Ethan spoke softly to his father, telling him stories from his childhood. The room felt peaceful, filled with something deeper than medicine, something human and alive. As the clock neared noon, the old man's hand twitched once more, and his fingers closed faintly around his son's. Ethan froze, tears welling instantly. "Dad?" he whispered. The faintest sound escaped his father's lips, a fragile whisper that carried one word. "Son." The world seemed to stop. Ethan covered his mouth, overcome, as Maya's eyes filled with tears. "He spoke," she whispered. "He said, 'Son.'" Ethan nodded slowly, his voice breaking. He is coming back. And for the first time in a year, the sound of that single word filled the room with more life than any machine ever could. The morning after Mr. Whitmore spoke, his first word felt unlike any other morning at Westbridge Rehabilitation Center. The air was charged with a quiet energy that pulsed through every hallway. Nurses whispered as they passed, doctors exchanged cautious glances, and even the janitor who cleaned the floors outside room 16 seemed to move a little slower, careful not to disturb the miracle happening inside. Maya Collins entered the room just after sunrise, her steps light, her pulse racing. Ethan Whitmore was already there, seated beside the bed, holding his father's hand as if afraid to let go. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his smile was the brightest she had ever seen. He said it again, Ethan whispered as soon as she walked in. He said my name when I spoke to him. Not clearly, but I heard it. Maya's eyes softened, and she smiled. That is incredible. Each word is a victory. She walked over and began her morning routine, checking the monitor and making quick notes. The old man's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm, the faint sound of his breathing blending with the quiet hum of the machines. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. "You are becoming quite the talk of the hospital. Everyone is proud of you." His eyelids fluttered, and his fingers twitched faintly. Ethan leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Dad, Maya is here. She is the one who kept singing to you." The old man's mouth moved slightly, and a sound escaped, hoarse, broken, but full of effort. "Song," he whispered. Ethan laughed through tears. "Yes, Dad, her song." Maya's eyes glistened, and she whispered, "You remember?" For a few moments, they simply stood there, watching the man who had once been silent begin to reach back toward the world. Ethan looked at her with awe. "He remembers your singing. That is how you reached him." Maya smiled, her tone soft but sure. "Music finds the parts of the heart that words cannot." She poured a glass of water, gently touching the old man's hand. "You are safe, Mr. Whitmore. You are doing so well." His eyes fluttered open for a fraction of a second blue, and clouded but aware. Ethan froze, his breath catching. "Dad?" The old man's eyes closed again, but the faintest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Maya's voice trembled. "He is waking up piece by piece. His body remembers love." Ethan covered his face for a moment, overcome with emotion. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with gratitude. "You did this, Maya." "No," she said quietly. "He did. I just gave him something to hold on to." The hours that followed were a blur of gentle progress. Dr. Reed came in with 2 nurses, running basic neurological tests while Maya assisted. The old man managed to move his fingers on command and nodded faintly when asked simple questions. The doctor looked both astonished and delighted. "This is extraordinary," he said. "His cognitive function is returning faster than expected." When the medical staff left, Maya and Ethan sat quietly beside the bed. The sunlight streaming through the window made the room glow in soft gold. "It feels like he is being reborn," Ethan said softly. Maya nodded. "In a way, he is." She reached for the paper crane on the bedside table and smiled. "I think we need to make another one." Ethan watched her fold a new crane, his expression full of quiet admiration. "How many of those do you plan to make?" "One for every good day," she said. "And today is one of the best." She placed the new crane beside the old one, both standing together like small symbols of resilience. Ethan looked down at his father, then back at her. "You have changed everything for us. For me." She smiled faintly, trying to deflect. "It was teamwork. You can call it whatever you like," he said. "But I know the truth. You reminded me what it means to care." She looked at him for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "Sometimes people just need someone to show them the way back," she said quietly. "That is what kindness does." The sound of the monitor filled the silence again, steady and calm. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice thoughtful. "I used to think my father and I were too different to ever understand each other. But now I see it was not about understanding. It was about showing up. Love is showing up," she said softly. "Even when it hurts." He looked at her, his voice low. "You speak like someone who has lived through pain." "I have," she admitted. "But pain has a strange way of teaching you how to love better." For a long moment, they sat in silence, both lost in thought. Then, from the bed, a raspy voice broke through the stillness. "Ethan," the old man whispered. Ethan shot to his feet, tears already in his eyes. "Dad, I am here. I am right here." The old man's lips trembled. "You stayed." "Always," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "I am not going anywhere." A faint smile touched the old man's face. "Proud," he whispered before slipping back into quiet rest. Ethan covered his face, his shoulders trembling. Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks as she whispered, "He knows you. He never stopped knowing you." Ethan turned to her, his voice barely a breath. "He said he is proud. I waited my whole life to hear that." Maya reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "Then let it heal you." He looked at her, emotion raw in his eyes. "It already has." Outside, the light grew warmer, spilling across the room, touching the paper cranes in the hands that held on to hope. The sound of the machines faded into the background, replaced by something deeper, the rhythm of life returning, one heartbeat at a time. The following day felt brighter than any before it. Sunlight spilled across the Westbridge Rehabilitation Center, warm and clean, as if the world itself had decided to celebrate. The story of Mr. Whitmore's recovery had spread through every corner of the hospital, carried in whispers and awe. Even patients in other rooms seemed to smile more that morning. When Maya Collins entered room 16, she found Ethan standing beside his father's bed, his sleeves rolled up, helping a nurse adjust the IV tube with quiet focus. The once distant businessman now moved with gentle hands, his expression soft and full of gratitude. He turned as Maya entered, his smile instant and warm. "You just missed it," he said. He spoke again, only a few words, but he said my mother's name this time. Maya's heart lifted. "He remembers her?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice trembling with emotion. He whispered Claire. I never thought I would hear him say it again. She stepped closer to the bed, looking down at the frail but steady figure, resting beneath the crisp white sheets. "That means more of his memory is returning," she said. "Every word is another thread tying him back to life." Ethan nodded, brushing a hand across his face. "It feels unreal." "It is as real as the hope that brought him here," she said softly. "Healing happens one small miracle at a time." She began her usual routine, checking vitals, changing the bedding, humming softly under her breath as she worked. The melody drifted through the room, light and gentle, wrapping around them like a familiar blanket. The old man's breathing grew steadier, his fingers twitching faintly to the rhythm. Ethan watched, awe flickering in his eyes. "He really does respond to your voice," he said. "It is like he knows you." Maya smiled, though her tone was humble. "Maybe he just remembers kindness." Ethan studied her face for a long moment. "You have given us more than kindness, Maya. You gave us back something we thought we lost forever." She shook her head lightly. "Love was never lost, Ethan. It was just waiting for you both to listen again." The room fell quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Ethan sat down in the chair beside her, his elbows on his knees, his gaze thoughtful. "You know," he said after a while, "before this happened, I spent my life chasing things that did not matter. Numbers, contracts, profits. I thought success was the same as happiness. But watching you care for him, it made me realize I have no idea what real success even means." Maya looked at him gently. "Maybe success is not about what you build, but who you lift." His lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "You make everything sound so simple." "Simple things are usually the hardest to see," she said. "That is why they matter most." Just then, the door opened, and Dr. Reed entered with 2 other physicians. He greeted them with a brief smile. "How is our miracle man today?" "Better," Maya said proudly. "He spoke again this morning." The doctor checked the monitors, nodding with quiet approval. "Remarkable," he said. "We will continue therapy with gradual muscle exercises. If this progress continues, we might begin cognitive rehabilitation by next week." Ethan's breath caught. "You mean he could actually walk and talk again?" "If his body cooperates, yes," the doctor replied. "It will take time, but this is no longer a question of if, it is a question of when." When they left, Ethan turned to Maya, his voice filled with awe. "Next week," he whispered. That sounds like a lifetime and a second all at once. Patience is part of healing, she said with a smile. He has already come so far. They sat quietly for a while, the sunlight soft across their faces. Then Ethan asked, "Why do you stay so late every day?" Most people would have left once their shift ended. Maya hesitated before answering. Because care does not end when the clock does. Some people just need to know they are not alone, even when they are asleep. Ethan looked at her with something tender in his eyes, something he had not felt in years. "You believe that with every part of you, do you not?" "I do," she said softly. "My mother taught me that compassion is not a profession, it is a calling." "Then it is a calling you were born for," he said. She smiled, trying to hide the emotion rising in her chest. "Maybe, or maybe I am just doing what someone once did for me." He frowned gently. "Who?" "A nurse who cared for my mother," she said. "She never gave up, even when hope seemed gone. I wanted to be like her." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his voice thoughtful. "If my father lives long enough to thank you himself, he will call you a miracle." "I do not need thanks," she said. "I just want him to see the people who love him again." Ethan nodded, his eyes misty. "He will. He already does." The air in the room grew still again, peaceful and alive. Then, as if sensing the warmth in their voices, the old man's eyes opened slowly, this time, but unmistakably. Ethan froze. "Dad?" The old man blinked, his gaze moving sluggishly from Maya to his son. For the first time in nearly a year, his voice came, rough and broken but filled with life. "Ethan." Ethan fell to his knees beside the bed, tears spilling freely. "I am here, Dad. I am right here." The old man's lips quivered. "Home," he whispered. "You brought me home." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she placed a hand over her heart. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitmore," she whispered. Ethan looked at her, unable to speak, his gratitude written in every tear that fell. And in that sunlit room where science had met faith, where grief had turned into grace, 3 lives were forever changed by the quiet, relentless power of love. For the first time in nearly a year, the morning light inside room 16 felt alive. The air carried warmth instead of stillness, and the quiet hum of machines now blended with the faint sound of laughter and whispered conversation. Mr. Whitmore was awake. Not fully strong, not completely steady, but awake, and that was enough to make the world feel new again. Maya Collins stood near the window, watching as Ethan helped his father sit upright with slow, deliberate movements. The older man's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of water on the bedside table. "Easy," Ethan said softly, his voice lined with both joy and caution. "Take your time." Mr. Whitmore nodded, his words still broken and slow. "I remember your mother's garden." Ethan's breath caught as he smiled. "She would have loved to hear you say that." Maya stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Your memory is returning beautifully, Mr. Whitmore. You are doing so well." The old man turned his head toward her, studying her face with quiet recognition. "You sang." Maya smiled, warmth spreading across her features. "Yes, sir, I did." "Beautiful," he whispered. "Like her." Ethan's throat tightened as emotion washed over him. Maya blinked back tears, unable to find words. The room filled with silence again. But it was the kind that comforted, not the kind that hurt. When the doctor entered later that morning, he found Ethan and Maya standing on either side of the bed, both smiling as Mr. Whitmore greeted him with a faint but distinct, "Good morning." Dr. Reed froze for a moment before laughing in disbelief. "Well, if this is not a miracle, I do not know what is. You, sir, are rewriting every rule in our medical books." Mr. Whitmore's lips twitched in what could almost be called a smile. "My son and her." The doctor followed his gaze to Maya, who stood with her hands clasped together, humbled by the acknowledgement. "You gave him something medicine could not," the doctor said quietly. "Sometimes the heart leads where science follows." When the doctor left, Ethan turned to Maya, his voice filled with a mix of pride and awe. "He recognized you. He remembered your song." "Maybe because the song carried memories," she said softly. "It belonged to love, not just to me." The day passed in waves of gentle progress. Physical therapists arrived to begin mild stretching exercises. Nurses came and went with encouraging smiles. And through it all, Ethan stayed by his father's side, his hand never leaving the old man's. Maya worked quietly, her presence steady and calm. Every now and then, she caught Ethan watching her, his eyes full of something deeper than gratitude. By evening, when the room had emptied and the hospital grew quieter, the golden sunset painted everything in shades of amber. Ethan stood by the window, his voice low. "You know, I spent my whole life chasing control. My father taught me to lead, to be strong, to never show weakness. But today, I realize strength is not about control, it is about surrender." Maya turned to him, her tone soft but steady. "Surrender is not weakness, Ethan. It is trust. Sometimes it takes more courage to let go than to hold on." He looked at her for a long time, then smiled faintly. "You speak like someone who has already learned that lesson." "Maybe I have," she said, her eyes lowering briefly. "But lessons like that are never learned easily." He took a slow step closer. "I wish I had met you sooner." She gave a quiet laugh. "You met me when you were supposed to." "Do you really believe that?" "I do," she said, meeting his gaze. "Some people come into our lives not to stay, but to remind us what home feels like." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt heavier, charged with something unspoken, but real. Then from the bed came a faint voice, hoarse but teasing. "Are you two always this serious?" Ethan turned sharply, surprised, then laughed through the tears that formed instantly. "Dad, you are listening to us?" "Hard, not to," the old man managed, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "She brings light," Maya laughed softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "And you bring strength, Mr. Whitmore." "You, both," he whispered. Ethan reached for his father's hand. "We are both right here, Dad. We are not going anywhere." The old man's hand squeezed back weakly, a simple gesture filled with meaning. "Thank you," he whispered. Maya blinked away tears. "You have nothing to thank me for." "You sang," he said again, closing his eyes. "You stayed." Ethan looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "He is right. You stayed when everyone else gave up." Maya shook her head gently. "Because giving up never heals anyone." Ethan's voice softened. "Then I hope you never stop doing what you do." "Neither should you," she said quietly. "You have a gift too. You just forgot what it was." "What is that?" he asked. "The ability to love without fear," she said. "You are learning it again." Outside, the last rays of sunlight faded behind the horizon, leaving only the soft hum of machines and the steady rhythm of breathing inside the room. Ethan pulled a blanket over his father, then turned back toward Maya. "He is sleeping," he whispered. "Peacefully," she said. They stood side by side for a long moment, both looking at the man who had once been silent and now rested with calm in his eyes. The paper cranes on the bedside table caught the dim light, their shadows long and graceful. Maya reached out, adjusting one slightly. "Another good day," she said softly. "The best so far," Ethan replied. Their eyes met briefly, warm, steady, and full of something that did not need to be spoken aloud. And in that quiet evening glow, the room that had once been filled with silence now held only peace, love, and the promise of tomorrow. Morning sunlight streamed through the window of room 16, warm and golden, spilling across the sheets and the steady heartbeat monitor beside the bed. It had been 1 week since Mr. Whitmore had opened his eyes, and each new day brought progress so remarkable that even the doctors had begun to visit the room with smiles instead of caution. Today was no different. Maya Collins arrived early, her uniform crisp, her hair tied neatly back, her expression carrying the calm determination she always wore. She found Ethan sitting at his father's bedside, holding a book in his hand. His father was awake, propped up with pillows, his voice still raspy but stronger now than before. "You read that one every morning," Maya said softly as she entered. Ethan smiled without looking up. "It is his favorite. My mother used to read it to him on quiet Sundays." The old man's voice came out like a whisper of wind. "Claire, always, read slow." Ethan's laughter filled the room, a sound so genuine it almost startled him. I know, Dad. You always told her she read too fast. Maya smiled as she checked the monitors. You are getting stronger, Mr. Whitmore. Each day, you surprise us. He turned his head toward her, his gaze clearer now, his blue eyes soft with recognition. You never stop singing. No, sir, she said with warmth. Music makes the healing go faster. You remind me of her, he said quietly. Gentle, kind. Maya's throat tightened, and she looked away for a moment. That is the best compliment I could ever receive. Ethan set the book down and reached for his father's hand. You are doing great, Dad. The doctors said you might start sitting in the garden soon. Garden, the old man murmured, smiling faintly. Sunlight. Yes, Maya said, smiling back. There will be plenty of sunlight waiting for you. The hours passed softly. Maya continued her duties while Ethan read quietly, occasionally glancing up to share small smiles with her. There was something peaceful about the rhythm of the room, the beeping of the monitor, the hum of the air conditioner, and the low, soothing sound of Ethan's voice reading aloud. At lunchtime, Dr. Reed entered to check the old man's progress. After reviewing the results, he nodded approvingly. Your father's recovery is exceeding every expectation, he said to Ethan. His vitals are stable, reflexes improving, and his speech is returning faster than anticipated. You should prepare for discharge within the next month if things continue this way. Ethan blinked, stunned. That soon? Yes, the doctor said. He will still need outpatient therapy, but he will be able to do it from home. After the doctor left, Ethan turned to Maya, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. He is really going home. He earned it, she said softly. He fought his way back. We fought our way back, Ethan corrected. You were part of this from the beginning. She smiled gently. It was an honor to be part of something so human. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, touching everything with gold. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his voice quieter now. You know, I used to believe love was a transaction. Give and take, balance. But this, what you have done, it is something different. You give without asking for anything back. She glanced at him, her voice tender but steady. Because that is the only kind of love that truly heals, he smiled faintly. Maybe that is the lesson I was supposed to learn from all this. Maybe, she said softly. Or maybe love has been waiting to teach you, and you are finally ready to listen. Ethan's eyes softened, full of something unspoken but real. I think I am. They sat quietly for a while, until a faint sound drew their attention. The old man was looking at both of them, his eyes glinting with humor. You two? Talk like philosophers, he rasped. Ethan chuckled. Maybe she is rubbing off on me. Good, the old man said weakly. She makes people better. Maya smiled, touched by his words. You make me better too, Mr. Whitmore. Promise to keep singing, he whispered. Always, she said. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of amber and rose. Maya helped Mr. Whitmore settle for rest, while Ethan stepped into the hallway to make a phone call. She hummed softly, the same song she had sung every night since she arrived, her voice low and soothing. When she looked up, she saw the old man watching her, his eyes moist. Thank you, he whispered. For my son. She shook her head gently. You brought him back. I just reminded him where to look. Ethan returned a moment later, his expression soft. He told you thank you, did he not? He did, Maya said, smiling. He is very proud of you. Ethan looked down at his father, emotion heavy in his voice. I am proud of him too. The three of them shared a long, quiet moment of peace. Then Maya began gathering her things. I should let you both rest. Ethan stood, hesitating before saying, Would you stay a little longer? Just until he falls asleep? She paused, then nodded. Of course. She sat by the window as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, her humming filling the room once more. Ethan watched her, the sound of her voice weaving warmth through the air, and he realized that something inside him had changed forever. When his father's breathing slowed into steady sleep, Ethan whispered, You have no idea how much light you have brought into this room. She looked at him quietly, her eyes kind. It was already here. You just forgot how to see it. And as night settled softly over the hospital, the room that had once held pain and silence now held peace, gratitude, and the quiet promise of beginnings yet to come. The next morning arrived with the sound of soft rain tapping against the windows, gentle and rhythmic like nature's lullaby. The hospital had quieted down after a busy night, and room 16 glowed with the soft light of dawn. Maya Collins entered with her usual calm, a warm cup of tea in one hand and a hopeful smile on her face. She found Ethan already awake, standing by the window with his jacket draped over the chair and his sleeves rolled up. His father was resting, his breathing steady and calm, his hand still faintly clasping the blanket. "Good morning," Maya said softly as she placed the tea on the table. Ethan turned toward her with a small smile. "Morning. I think he slept through the night for the first time." "That is a wonderful sign," she said, checking the monitors. "His body is rebuilding strength. Sleep means he is healing." Ethan nodded, his gaze shifting to his father. "He looks peaceful. I have not seen him this way in years." Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe peace comes when love finally speaks louder than fear." Ethan turned toward her, his eyes soft. "You always know what to say. Maybe I just listen differently," she said gently. "Sometimes the right words come from silence." They stood quietly for a moment, the sound of rain filling the space between them. Then Ethan said, "The doctors told me they will start his walking therapy tomorrow. It feels strange seeing him like this after everything. I used to think of him as indestructible." "Fathers often seem that way," she said softly, "until life reminds us that strength does not mean invincibility." Ethan nodded. "I spent years trying to be like him, working, competing, never showing weakness. But now, seeing him like this, I realize I misunderstood him. He was never running from emotions. He was protecting them." Maya looked at him thoughtfully. "And now, you are learning to protect your own." "Maybe," he said, his voice quiet. "Or maybe you are teaching me how." She smiled but said nothing. The rain grew heavier outside, painting silver streaks down the glass. Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out an old photo, his parents standing in front of their garden, his mother holding a basket of flowers, his father smiling with rare tenderness. "I found this last night," he said, showing it to her. He kept it in his wallet all these years. Maya traced the edge of the photo gently with her fingertips. "It is beautiful," she said. "You can see love in the way they look at each other." Ethan nodded slowly. "I used to think love faded with time, but now I think it changes form. Maybe that is what you have been trying to teach me." "Love never disappears," she said quietly. "It just finds new ways to speak." She looked at the photo again, then smiled softly. "Bring this tomorrow. When he starts therapy, it might help him remember what he is walking toward." Ethan looked at her with admiration. "You think of everything." "No," she said, shaking her head lightly. "I just pay attention." He chuckled softly. "That is your secret then." "Maybe," she said. "Pay attention long enough, and the world starts to tell you what it needs." They fell into an easy silence again, watching the rain. After a moment, Ethan said, "When this is all over, I want to do something meaningful. For people like him, for families who lose hope. Maybe start a foundation or a clinic in his name." "That would be a beautiful legacy," Maya said sincerely. "One built from compassion, not money." "You will help me, right?" he asked, half teasing, half serious. "If you are asking for professional advice, yes," she said with a smile. "If you are asking for friendship, always." His eyes softened. "Both?" he said quietly. The air between them shifted, gentle but charged with something neither of them could name. Then a faint voice broke through the moment. "You two? Planning my future already?" Ethan turned instantly, his face lighting up. "Dad, you are awake." The old man gave a weak smile. "I never sleep for long. Too much talking." Maya laughed softly, moving closer to check his vitals. "You have two very good reasons to stay awake now." "Yes," he murmured. "My son, and the angel who sings." Maya blushed, slightly, adjusting the blanket. "I am just a nurse, Mr. Whitmore." "No," he whispered. "You brought me back." Ethan leaned down and gently clasped his father's hand. "We both did, Dad. She just showed me how." The old man's eyes flickered between them, a glimmer of knowing passing through them. Then, "Keep her close, son." Ethan froze, speechless, his throat tight with emotion. Maya smiled gently, pretending not to notice the weight of those words. "Rest now," she said softly. "You will need your strength for tomorrow." As she adjusted the light, Ethan remained beside his father, still processing what had just been said. When the older man drifted back to sleep, he turned to Maya. "He is not wrong," he said quietly. "About what?" she asked. "About keeping you close." Maya smiled faintly, her eyes lowering. "Be careful, Ethan. Recovery is emotional for everyone. Sometimes gratitude feels like something else." He stepped closer, his voice low. "And what if it is something else?" She met his gaze, steady and calm. "Then let time prove it." The rain began to ease outside, leaving behind the soft scent of renewal. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before finally nodding. "Time, then," he said. She gave a small smile. "Time always tells the truth." And as they stood there in the quiet room, with the old man sleeping peacefully between them, and the storm fading beyond the window, it was clear that something had begun to bloom, something as fragile and powerful as hope itself. The next morning came clear and bright, the kind of morning that made the hospital feel more like a sanctuary than a place of recovery. The rain had passed, leaving the sky clean and open, sunlight spilling through every window like a quiet promise. In room 16, the soft scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Maya Collins stood by the window, arranging a new bouquet of white lilies that Ethan had brought in earlier. Their fragrance mixed with the sterile scent of disinfectant, bringing warmth to the once cold space. Behind her, Mr. Whitmore was sitting upright in his bed for the first time without assistance. His hands were still frail, but his eyes, those pale blue eyes that had been closed for months, were alive with recognition. Ethan stood beside him, adjusting the pillow behind his father's back, his movements patient and careful. "How does that feel?" he asked. "Like I have climbed a mountain," the old man said between shallow breaths, his tone weak but full of humor. "A small one," Ethan teased, smiling. "We are starting with hills." Maya turned from the window, her smile warm and encouraging. "Every mountain begins with a single step, Mr. Whitmore. You are doing wonderfully." He looked at her, his expression soft. "You have a healer's voice, Miss Collins. And you have a fighter's spirit," she replied. The room grew quiet again, filled only with the hum of machines and the sound of their breathing. Then Ethan said, "He has been asking about home. He wants to see the garden." Maya nodded. "It will be good for him. Fresh air and familiar surroundings will help his recovery." "The doctors say another 2 weeks," Ethan said, his voice carrying quiet excitement. "After that, he can leave." "He will be ready," she said confidently. Mr. Whitmore smiled faintly. "I want to see the roses," he murmured. "Claire planted them." Maya's heart softened. "We will make sure you do, sir." Ethan looked at her with gratitude in his eyes. "You have done so much for us. I do not know how to repay you." "You already have," she said gently. "Seeing him awake is more than enough." "No," Ethan said softly. "You gave me back my father. That is something I can never repay." For a moment, their eyes met, something deep and unspoken passing between them. Maya quickly turned her focus back to her work, checking the monitor to steady her thoughts. "He needs rest now," she said. "Recovery is a journey, not a race." Ethan smiled. "You always know the right thing to say." "Only because I have had to remind myself of the same things," she said quietly. The old man watched them both with a faint smile that carried wisdom and amusement. "Ethan," he said, his voice rasping slightly, "she is the reason I am still here." Ethan glanced down at his father. "We both know that, Dad." "Then do not let her go," the old man said, his tone soft but certain. Maya's cheeks flushed as she tried to deflect the conversation. "You should focus on getting your strength back, Mr. Whitmore." "Strength," he said with a small laugh, "comes in many forms." Later that afternoon, when Maya returned from her short lunch break, she found Ethan sitting alone by the window. His father was asleep, his breathing steady. The light outside had shifted, painting the room with gold. Ethan looked up as she entered. "He fell asleep not long ago," he said quietly. "He looks peaceful." "He is healing," she said. "Peace is part of that." Ethan nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. "Maya, when this is over, when he is home, I do not want this to be goodbye." She froze for a moment, then spoke softly. Ethan, you will not need a nurse once he is home. I do not mean professionally, he said quickly. I mean personally. She looked at him, her voice calm but guarded. You are still in the middle of something emotional. It is natural to feel connected after what you have been through. This is not confusion, he said firmly. I know what I feel. And what is that? She asked quietly. He took a breath. Grateful, inspired, alive, things I have not felt in years. But more than that, I care about you, Maya, deeply. She held his gaze, the honesty in his voice breaking through her walls. Ethan, she said softly, I care too. But right now, your father needs all of you, not divided by anything else. Maybe love is what keeps people whole, he said, not what divides them. Her heart tightened at his words. Maybe, she whispered. But timing matters. Let us not rush something that deserves patience. He nodded slowly, understanding the truth behind her words even as they hurt. You are right, he said quietly. I just do not want to lose you. You will not, she said with a small smile. Some connections do not depend on place or circumstance. They both turned as the old man stirred, his voice faint but clear. Ethan, he murmured, did I ever tell you? Your mother used to say, love waits for the right season. Ethan's eyes softened. No, Dad, you did not. Now you know, his father said with a weak smile before drifting back to sleep. Maya's voice was a whisper. Even he agrees. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. Then I will wait for the right season. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then it will come. Outside, the last light of day began to fade, the golden hue turning soft and silver. The paper cranes on the bedside table caught the glow one last time before the shadows embraced them. Inside room 16, 3 hearts rested in quiet harmony, one healing, one learning, and one waiting for the moment when all things would find their perfect time. The morning of Mr. Whitmore's first walking therapy arrived bright and clear, sunlight pouring through the windows like golden silk. The hospital seemed unusually alive that day, with nurses smiling as they passed room 16 and doctors stopping briefly at the doorway just to witness the man who had defied every prognosis. Inside, Ethan Whitmore stood beside his father, steadying him as the physical therapist adjusted the walker. Maya Collins stood nearby, her hands clasped together, her eyes filled with quiet encouragement. The old man's legs trembled as he took the first step, his grip tight on the metal bars, his breath shallow but determined. Easy, Mr. Whitmore, Maya said softly, one step at a time. One step, he murmured, his voice hoarse but alive. Ethan smiled, tears glinting in his eyes. You are doing it, Dad. You are really doing it. Do not sound surprised, the old man managed with a faint grin. Laughter filled the room, light and pure. Each step was slow, deliberate, but every inch forward felt monumental. When he reached the end of the small therapy lane, Maya's eyes shimmered with pride. That was incredible, she said, her voice trembling. You just did what many thought was impossible. Impossible, Mr. Whitmore said between breaths, is just another word for stubborn. Then I guess you have always been stubborn, Ethan said, chuckling. Runs in the family. The therapist helped him back to bed, and Maya adjusted his blanket with gentle care. You earned your rest today, she said, but we are just getting started. Good, the old man said. I like a challenge. When the therapist left, Ethan sat beside his father, watching him drift into sleep. The faint hum of the machines filled the silence. Maya sat across from them, her eyes tracing the lines of peace now etched across the old man's face. He looks stronger already, she whispered. He is stronger, Ethan replied. Because of you. She shook her head. Because of love. Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. You really believe love can heal anything, do you not? I have seen it happen, she said. When love stays long enough, even silence begins to speak. He studied her, his eyes filled with admiration. You know, before all this, I thought power was what defined people. But you, everything about you proves the opposite. You make strength look quiet, she smiled faintly. Real strength does not need to be loud. They fell silent, their connection unspoken but undeniable. Then, suddenly, A soft knock interrupted the moment. Dr. Reed entered, holding a clipboard. "Good afternoon," he said cheerfully. "I just came by to check on our miracle man. He walked today," Ethan said proudly. "First steps." The doctor's eyebrows lifted. "Already? That is remarkable. At this rate, we might release him sooner than expected." "So soon?" Maya asked. "Another week, perhaps," Dr. Reed replied. "We will run final tests, but if his vitals hold steady, he will be ready for home care." Ethan smiled, relief and joy mixing in his voice. "Home?" he repeated softly. When the doctor left, the word lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. "Home," Maya echoed quietly. "That will feel good for both of you." "For all of us," Ethan said, looking at her. She smiled, not meeting his gaze. "I will miss seeing him every day." "And me?" he asked, half teasing, half sincere. She hesitated, then met his eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "You too." For a moment, the air between them felt fragile, suspended in something unspoken. Then she stood, smoothing her uniform. "I should update his records before the evening shift." "Maya," Ethan said suddenly. She turned. "Yes? When this is over, I want you to visit. Not as a nurse, just as you." She smiled faintly. "Let us make sure he gets home first." "He will," Ethan said. "And when he does, I will hold you to that promise." "Promises are sacred," she said gently. "So is healing." The day passed quietly, filled with small victories and peaceful silence. By sunset, the old man was resting again, and the orange glow of evening painted the room in warmth. Ethan sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Maya stood beside him, the soft hum of the machines blending with the quiet rhythm of their breathing. "You will not forget this place," she said. "You found something here." "I found someone," he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity, and found it there plain and unguarded. "Do not say things you do not mean," she said softly. "I mean every word," he replied. "Then hold on to them," she said, "because moments like this are rare." He nodded, his voice low. "So are people like you." She looked away, her heart heavy and full at once. "I should go. He will need me early tomorrow." Ethan stood as she turned to leave. "Maya," he called after her. She paused in the doorway. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me back more than I ever thought I could have." She smiled, the kind of smile that reached the soul. "You gave it back to yourself, Ethan. I just reminded you how." Then she left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Ethan stood in the doorway long after she was gone, the room glowing softly behind him. His father stirred slightly, half awake. Special," the old man murmured. Ethan smiled, his voice low. "Yes, Dad, she is. Don't lose her," the old man whispered before drifting back to sleep. Ethan looked out the window, watching the last traces of sunset disappear into night, and whispered to himself, "I will not." The day of discharge arrived with clear skies, and a soft morning breeze that drifted through the open window of room 16. The sterile scent of antiseptic had been replaced by the faint aroma of lilies and sunlight. Nurses moved quietly through the corridor, and for the first time in many months, Mr. Whitmore sat fully dressed, wearing a dark blue sweater and a smile that carried both exhaustion and peace. Ethan stood beside him, his hands in his pockets, watching as Maya Collins adjusted the final bandage on his father's wrist. Her movements were gentle and practiced, her voice steady. "There," she said softly. "You are officially free, Mr. Whitmore." "Free," he murmured with a slow grin. "That sounds strange after so long." "Strange," Ethan said with warmth in his voice, "but good." Maya looked at both of them, her heart full. "You earned it," she said. "Both of you." The old man reached for her hand, his fingers trembling but strong enough to hold on. "I would not be walking out of here if not for you," he said. "You brought me back." She shook her head gently. "You brought yourself back, sir. I just walked beside you." His gaze softened. "Then you walked with light." Ethan smiled at that, his voice full of affection. "He means thank you." "I know," Maya said with a laugh. "And you are both very welcome." After a few final checks, Dr. Reed entered with discharge papers and a proud smile. "Well, Mr. Whitmore," he said cheerfully, "you are the talk of every department in this hospital. I think you just became our miracle case of the year." "No miracle," the old man said. "Just love." The doctor chuckled. "Whatever it was, it worked. Congratulations to all of you." When he left, Maya began packing the small collection of paper cranes and photographs that had gathered on the windowsill over the past few months. Each one represented a memory, every sunrise, every quiet song, every moment of fragile hope. She paused when she picked up the last paper crane, tracing its folded wings before setting it gently into the box. Ethan noticed and smiled. "You made those on the hard days," he said. "I remember." "They were for him," she said softly, "but maybe they were for all of us." "You can keep them," the old man said, his voice low but sure. "For your next patient, so they remember that hope flies." Her throat tightened as she nodded. "Thank you, sir. I will." A few minutes later, a wheelchair was brought in, and with slow, deliberate care, Ethan helped his father settle into it. Maya walked alongside as they rolled down the hallway toward the elevator. Every staff member they passed stopped to wave or smile, some even clapping quietly. The hallway that had once felt cold and endless now shimmered with quiet triumph. When they reached the hospital entrance, sunlight flooded the lobby, painting everything in gold. Ethan stepped outside first, breathing in the fresh air. His father followed, eyes closed for a moment, as if savoring the warmth on his face. "Home," the old man whispered. "It smells like home," Maya smiled. "That is the smell of freedom." The driver opened the car door, and Ethan helped his father inside carefully. Before closing the door, Mr. Whitmore reached for Maya's hand once more. "Promise me something," he said. "What is that?" she asked softly. "Do not stop doing what you do," he said. "People like me need people like you." "I promise," she said, her voice trembling. "And you, Mr. Whitmore, do not stop believing in yourself." "I will not," he said, his eyes gentle, "because you believed first." Ethan leaned against the car, watching the exchange with quiet admiration. When his father settled in, he turned to Maya. "I do not even know how to begin saying goodbye." "Then do not," she said with a small smile. "Goodbyes are for endings. This feels like a beginning." "It does," he said, his voice low. "I meant what I said before, Maya. I want to see you again, not in a hospital, somewhere that feels like life." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "One day, maybe?" "No," he said softly. "Not maybe. I will find you." She looked at him, her eyes steady but full of emotion. "Then I will trust time again." He nodded, understanding her unspoken meaning. "Time has been good to us so far." "Yes," she said, "and it still will be." The driver started the engine, and Ethan stepped back. Maya waved as the car pulled away, the morning light glinting off its surface. She watched until it disappeared around the corner, her heart both heavy and light at once. When she finally turned back toward the hospital, the corridors felt quieter without them. But the echo of laughter and hope still lingered. That afternoon, as the sun began to sink, Maya walked through the garden behind the hospital. The flowers were in full bloom, roses, lilies, and daisies swaying gently in the breeze. She sat on a bench, closing her eyes, letting the sunlight warm her face. Somewhere deep inside, she could still hear Mr. Whitmore's voice saying, "You walked with light." A tear slipped down her cheek, but it was not a sad tear, it was gratitude. She had seen life return to a man who had once been lost. She had watched love rebuild what fear had broken. And she knew that wherever Ethan and his father were now, they carried her song with them. The world around her glowed with peace, and for the first time in a long while, Maya felt the same light she had given to others, shining quietly within her own heart. Spring came early that year, bringing soft winds and sunlight that felt like forgiveness. 3 months had passed since Mr. Whitmore left the hospital, and the Whitmore estate, once cold and quiet, now pulsed with gentle life again. The garden was blooming rows of roses, hydrangeas, and the same lilies that had filled his hospital room. The sound of laughter drifted through the open windows as Ethan pushed his father's wheelchair along the cobblestone path that wound through the yard. "Careful," the old man said with a faint smile. "You are running me over every pebble in this place." Ethan laughed, slowing down. "That is because you keep trying to steer. You never liked letting anyone else drive," his father teased. Now you know how it feels." They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like time had folded back, bringing them to a place where everything broken had been quietly mended. The sun cast a warm glow across their faces as they reached the small wooden bench at the edge of the garden. Ethan parked the chair beside it, looking around with satisfaction. "The roses finally came in," he said, "just like Mom used to grow them." The old man nodded slowly. "She would have liked this. You did well." Ethan's expression softened. "We did well, Dad. All of us." The old man smiled knowingly. "She has not visited yet?" "Who?" Ethan asked. "You know who," his father said. "The girl who sang me back to life." Ethan shook his head with a small smile. "Not yet, but I have written to her. I told her about the clinic we are opening downtown next month." "Clinic?" "The Whitmore Foundation for Healing and Care," Ethan said. "It will offer free rehabilitation for patients who cannot afford treatment. I thought it was time we gave something back." His father's eyes glistened. "Your mother would be proud." "She is not the only one," Ethan said softly. "Maya inspired this. Everything she did, her compassion, her strength, it reminded me what real leadership looks like." The old man chuckled. "And what about love? Did she remind you about that too?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Every single day, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of fresh lilies. And for a moment the garden seemed to hum with quiet approval." Later that afternoon, a car pulled up the long driveway. Ethan turned, his heart skipping when he saw Maya stepping out. She wore a pale blue dress and carried a small box in her hands. Her hair caught the sunlight, and she looked almost exactly as he remembered her, steady, kind, and somehow stronger than anyone he knew. "You came," he said, walking toward her. "You invited," she replied with a smile. "I could not say no to a grand opening." "It is not until next week," he said, smiling back. "I just wanted you to see it first." "You are terrible at surprises, Ethan," she teased gently. "Only when it comes to you," he said. They walked through the garden together, his father watching from the bench with a quiet smile. When they reached him, Maya knelt beside the chair and took his hand. "You look wonderful, Mr. Whitmore," she said warmly. "Better than I did last time you saw me," he said. "That is because you are walking miracles into your days now," she said softly. "No," he said, "because you taught us how." Her eyes glistened. "You are too kind." "Kindness," the old man said with a smile, "is what saved me." He looked at both of them, then added with a knowing tone, "Now it is your turn." Maya and Ethan exchanged a glance, both smiling but quiet. After a moment, she opened the box she had brought. Inside was a single paper crane, golden and folded with care. "I kept one," she said. "The last one from his room. I thought it belonged here." Ethan took it gently and placed it on the garden bench beside the lilies. "It is perfect," he said. They stayed outside until the sun began to set, the sky turning soft shades of rose and amber. The air was calm, the kind that only comes when everything has finally found its place. When Mr. Whitmore was wheeled back inside, Ethan and Maya stood under the old oak tree that bordered the yard. "He is right, you know," Ethan said quietly. "About what?" she asked. "About it being my turn." "Your turn to do what?" "To follow what I feel," he said. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what do you feel?" He took a step closer, his gaze steady and full of quiet conviction. "Gratitude, respect, and something that has grown into more than either of those." Her heart pounded, but her voice was calm. "Ethan, you do not have to say anything," he said gently. "Time already told me what matters. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what healing means. It was never just about my father, it was about all of us. You healed him, and somehow, you healed me too." Her eyes softened, filled with emotion she could no longer hide. "Maybe we healed each other," she said. The silence that followed was full and alive, like music only they could hear. The wind lifted slightly, carrying the faint rustle of the garden. Ethan reached for her hand, and this time she did not pull away. They stood there together, two people who had met by chance and changed each other by choice. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, the house behind them glowed with golden light, and inside, Mr. Whitmore's soft laughter echoed through the open window. Maya looked up at the sky, then back at Ethan. "It feels like everything has come full circle," she said. It has, he said. But this time, it is not an ending. It is a beginning. The first stars began to appear, and somewhere deep in the garden, the golden paper crane shimmered faintly in the twilight, a small reminder that love, when it is real, does not fade. It simply changes shape and keeps on living, quietly, endlessly, in the hearts it has touched.